Mr. Given that same talk to
All right, you guys, we're going to go live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay, we will start this meeting. Let's see, it's October 10th. My wife's birthday, I better know this. I hadn't even had to look it up. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Palmer.
Here.
Ms. McGuire. Here. Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. Gajewski.
Here.
Ms. Krasko here. Mr. Weed.
Here.
Mr. Byer.
Here. Thank you. Do we have any agenda additions tonight from anyone? Seeing none? Okay, we'll move on. Public comment. We have 2 public comment periods. First one, we ask you fill out a card. Tell us what you're concerned about. You have 4 minutes to speak. Do we have any cards?
We do not.
Okay. We have a second one at the very end. No cards needed, but 4-minute rule still is in place. So, okay. Next, we have a presentation from the U.S. Postal Service regarding mode conversion. I'm sorry. No. Conversation.
No, it should be conversion.
Okay. Mine says, honestly, conversation. Are we going to have a conversation?
I think we should have a conversation.
I'm covered then, all right.
Okay, very good. So from the last time that we came to visit, we've had an opportunity to take a couple of the DDA members out and look at our potential placements for the boxes. So to kind of just, we're going to go over a brief overview just to get everybody on the same page and kind of caught up, and then we're going to dig into the meat part of it. So from the postal perspective, in front of you, I'll try to signify when we're changing pages to kind of keep everybody informed. One of the key things the post office is doing is looking at ways that we can streamline our delivery services to improve efficiency for all consumers across the board, and also create a level of security for our business customers by providing locking mailbox receptacles. So we turn to the next page. Something that we've covered and we're just going to touch on is that for potential placements, one of the things that we always bring up is Oscoda Services 5,346 current deliveries. Of that, 3,547 are already out to the curb. So it kind of keeps things in perspective of what we're doing walking versus driving. The 3,547 represents the number of driving deliveries that we currently have. If I could ask you to turn to the next page, please. Mode conversion occurs in 3 phases. The first phase that we've discussed was the centralized mailbox placements, or CBU will be a term that you commonly will be heard us referring to. We've been looking at how we're going to install centralized mailbox delivery for the business area that is represented by the DDA, or the Downtown Development Authority. That would be right along US 23, the businesses that are affected down in that area. There are some properties that we have looked at for potential placement that actually are on Township property. So that's what brings us here back again this evening to discuss those actual locations. So that's the first phase of mode conversion, and there are 2 other phases, but for all practical purposes of tonight, we're going to focus on the first one. But just to give you a general idea, phase 2 of mode conversion is mailbox placements. We work with local homeowners to eliminate jump stop delivery or delivery stretches that make more economical sense for us to deliver from the curb. We may already have curb line delivery, and there may be some sections like down in 1st Street North, 2nd Street North, down in that area, where we're walking and then suddenly we're driving and then we're walking again, and it's called a zigzag delivery pattern. We're working with the homeowners to pull some of those out to the curb or streamline it up so that it just makes more sense as far as delivery goes. Phase 3 is just the simple mailboxes off porches, and that's just asking homeowners if we can move their mailboxes out to the rail. Not away from their homes, not to the curb, just to the rail so we can reach them, have them avoid going down the steps, have us avoid going up them, just to improve safety and efficiency. So the real reason that we're here is to discuss the potential placement of centralized mailboxes on township property. I'm going to have you flip ahead to, I apologize that these aren't numbered, but it would be your 6th one. It's titled CBU Areas for Consideration. And this is just the overview page. I ask that you maybe pull this one out and keep handy as a reference for you moving forward. There's only a few that end up on township property, but we're just going to go over all of them and then come back to the ones that are township related. So the first one is at the parking lot entrance on CBU placement number 1. It's on the north side of Division Street between Lake and Huron. That's right in the entrance of a township parking lot. And does everybody are we all on the same page? Does that make sense there? When we look at mailbox placement, we're looking at including the delivery points that are within one walking block of that location. We've listed some addresses within each grouping that we would like to suggest go within that centralized mailbox unit. However, that is subject to change based off the need of those within it. Some may park at a different location, maybe they own multiple businesses, things of that nature. On turning the page to centralized mailbox unit number 2, CBU unit, this is also along a fence in the parking lot of the township. This one is on the south side of Park between Huron and Lake. It's only one unit, so we're looking for a space that's approximately 4 feet by 4 feet. The unit itself is 30 inches wide and 15 inches deep. It would encompass up to 16 resident business deliveries. So not a whole lot of folks going to that one. Centralized unit number 3 would be between Hallmark and Tate's. This is actually on Tate's property. And we've spoken with him, and he was very receptive and supportive, and he has already agreed to allow us to place it there. So that's on the north side of Dwight between Lake and Huron. There would be 2 units there, so a potential of 24 deliveries. Turning the page to CBU unit number 4 and number 5, it shows an island in the middle of a township parking lot. That unit there would be actually 3 mailboxes, and it would have, the island is located in the township parking lot behind the Dairy Queen. As I was driving through there this afternoon, they were cutting the sidewalk, and there was like a backhoe and stuff, so hopefully all is okay. The space that we would need there is 4 feet wide and 12 feet long, so it would take up that first section of that island. Okay, so up to the drain hole there, okay? Turning the page to number 6. This is on the north side of Bank Street between Huron and Lake. There would be up to 32 deliveries and 2 mailboxes placed there. This is one that we've already spoken with and has already agreed for placement. If we turn the page to number 7, this one's in front of the oil change place. Miss Jackson's businesses would all be within this area. We've spoken with her as well and has already agreed for placement. Moving on to number 8. This is Mary Ann Wheeler's at CNE Designs, 307 State Street on the north side of the driveway. This one is also a private property and has already agreed for placement. Moving to number 9. This one was a real twist your arm, you guys. This is our property at the post office. So this one would encompass a potential 12 deliveries, and it's small right at the back entrance that we use to gain the employee parking lot. Number 10 is definitely for sure township property. This one has a couple of different choices, either right next to your drop box for your own correspondence and things of that nature, paying bills. There's a drop box right there that's small. But because of the size of that tree, I sent a maintenance man up here to certify that that could be a potential placement, because that is what was asked of us. That could damage the roots of that tree, so we are concerned. So the other option would be going across the parking lot and just adding onto that sidewalk right there a small pad that would be 4 feet by 4 feet for one mailbox, and that would keep the township's mail very close to where you are at now. Number 11, moving forward, is at an apartment complex. That's private property, and we're all settled with those folks. 209 Water Street. There are 20 apartments that will be moving into a centralized mailbox unit, so that's kind of exciting. When we met with your representatives from the DDA, or the Downtown Development Authority, on this next page where it says features and color choices, they opted for Vogue CA, which has the ball on the top and the rounded base on the bottom to match the light fixtures that are already in the downtown area. They also selected black as a color preference to kind of coordinate with what is already there.
I'm sorry, which one did they opt for?
It
The
is,
circled ones.
Oh, okay,
But in black.
in black. All right, thank you.
so, the preferences that were selected was black was the color that was chosen, the balls on the top and the rounded bottom. If we turn to the preference selected page, which is the very next one, it kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of what the units will actually look like, because they're kind of assembled on that page. Each unit has large parcel lockers at the bottom, and that's the packages that do not fit in those, and customers who are package pickup sites will continue to receive services as they normally have. It's just that the majority of their business mail will go to the box on days that they don't have large items, but we will continue to pick up all outgoing mail as we always have. Each recipient of these locations will receive 3 keys. The 3 keys can be copied at any hardware store, and we'll be working with the hardware to make sure they have the proper blanks, but there's no limit to key copying. Postal Service does not keep a copy of those keys on site, so we encourage those folks to just take an active role and tuck those keys away somewhere safe, because if they lose them out boating or if they lose them out on a wild adventure, then it's a $40 fee. But typically our business owners aren't really those that misplace keys and things like that, so it's not usually a big item. In the event that we were to have new businesses move into the downtown area, the Postal Service will provide them with a free set of keys and place them in the appropriate mailbox. In the event that the mailboxes were to become knocked down, damaged, or vandalized, the Postal Service would accept all responsibility for the repair or placement of these said boxes. That's something that always comes up, and it's very important to continuously point out. I do have to mention though here that in the event that someone did hop the curb or something crazy happened and we lost a box, or a snowstorm, sometimes randomly a plow might lose control and knock one down. Initially, the box that comes out to replace them, because it's an emergent need, is gray. So Kim would work diligently to get you a black box to continue the color pattern and to make it look nice, but just know that right away, the first 48 hours, it will be gray until we can get that one ordered in here. If you want to turn the page to our closest install to you folks is actually East Tawas, and there's some really good pictures for them that Miss Ann printed for us in color. Go Ann. That's greatly appreciated. It's a very similar style box, the same features, it's just that your boxes would be black and their boxes are white. And just to touch on a few things that we just briefly talked about, if you'd like to turn the page. Phase 2, the township is slightly affected with Phase 2 because we do have some curb line placements that we'll be working directly with the township on, and providing a list and going through that. So for curb line placement, we're trying to keep the boxes as contained as possible, so those folks that are interested in moving out to the curb in support of the effort are being placed with a neighbor or a few neighbors to limit the number of boxes we have out there. And then we'll also be doing a cleanup phase with that too, because we do have some helter-skelter boxes out there. Curb line placement is going on actually right now. We put out some stakes to give the township folks an idea of where we would be potentially placing boxes, as well as our plow group and our mail carriers, so everybody can kind of start getting familiar with where the boxes could go. So I would encourage you all to take time to drive through there to see where those stakes are placed. Typically, they're pretty close to a phone pole, because that's just a good landmark, so if you're out driving, that's what you'd be looking for. Mailboxes off porches is the next page, if we can hop you ahead one, to phase 3. Phase 3 always happens last, and then it becomes an ongoing effort where we're just working with homeowners to ask them if they could graciously help us move their mailbox to a rail, or sometimes even to an alternate entrance of the home. If we're already walking past it, then sometimes it's easier for all of us. They might not even be using that front door. They might actually be gaining access through the garage or something like of a similar nature. So we just move them to there, and then the world keeps turning and everybody's happy. So, going back to the original reason why we came, is that we're asking for permission from the board if we can place the mailboxes on township property for the few that are that we've kind of staked out with an agreement with the DDA as potential placement. So we're looking at a couple parking lot entrances and a center island. Does anybody have questions or concerns?
When we get our mail on Mondays, it's usually in a large tote already that by the pictures don't look like it would fit anywhere near inside that box, even with the package box. Would it then be delivered into the building? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would never delay your mail, because if it doesn't fit, then we'll take definite care to make sure that you get it.
Okay.
Some of these look like they're gonna be over or right next to parking spots.
Not necessarily right next to parking spots. The ones that are in front of Tate's, between Hallmark and Tate's Bill of Fare, that would be in front of a parking spot, next to an parking lot entrance. So yes and no. The parking lot one that we have in number 1 is at the entrance of a parking lot in front of one parking space.
It is in front of a parking space.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
And how does that get handled with it being in front of a
It's
parking
a
space?
little bit more towards the road, Aaron, actually, than it is, in front of the parking spot,
Okay.
so. And it could be handled with some, it needs to be restriped anyways, that parking lot, so it could be handled that way as well.
And what about number 2?
Number 2, is currently striped as a, actually I believe it's a handicap spot, and we could eliminate that spot, because it's technically not by a business. When it was restriped a couple of years ago, they just put it back, they put the handicap spot there, and there's actually no business even, at that location. So we could just move it over and restripe things according to where the placement of the CBU.
Move the handicap spot over?
Mhm.
Do the other handicap spots have signs over them?
The handicap spots on the parking lot between, that's over closer to Division Street too.
So, the one on parking lot number 2, now I'm going off on the parking spots here,
Mm-hmm.
that was intended to be a handicap parking spot or not?
That's kind of I think it was like that way from a long time ago, and when we restriped it, they put it there, but it really doesn't make sense to be there because there's really not a business there
Okay.
that it serves.
I just
as a
wanna make sure our
spot.
handicap parking spots have signs over them.
Right.
Otherwise, they're not a legal parking spot.
I believe there was more than one there too.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the parking lot that's currently by the old Dollar General building, that's a public parking lot, that, it shows that, that's the, right in the middle in the island area. So there's no parking spots around there.
Okay.
You would cement that case?
Mhm.
Yeah, the postal service would actually cement that in too and mount the boxes on there. At no cost to the township.
You talked to private property owners, and now you're talking to township. Did you discuss snow and how it's gonna be handled?
We have been working with Ann about the snow issues, and snow removal is technically, it's a collective effort that we like to make. When the private property owners are aware of that, and they have to clear their box just like they would clear their normal space. So,
That kinda is why they were placed where they were. Mark,
And who's
is because it's currently areas that we remove snow from, those parking
Who's
lots.
responsible to keep them clear of ice for liability concerns?
Well, they're cleared with the plow wise, but they're not gonna be like hand shoveled out, I guess.
Or salted.
Hmm?
Or
Salted.
salted.
We don't generally salt the parking lots.
That could be a major concern, especially dealing with the public.
and didn't you speak with your attorney regarding your liability?
Well, in regard to liability, actually, the question, was brought up to both the attorney and our insurance carrier. In regard to liability, it is covered under our premise liability, and our insurance carrier doesn't see any increase in the cost, for if these are placed on our property, these couple.
Having said that, just for clarification's sake, I think it would be reasonable to conclude it does expand our liability. The potential for something happening is expanded, but we have
That was my next
insurance
question.
coverage for it.
Will it
Yeah.
expand our liability?
And-
Yes.
And obviously, if you had a reoccurring situation where, there was a problem in a certain area because of an uneven sidewalk or something, the insurance, carrier could red flag that because it was a reoccurring problem that needed to be addressed. So that's something that we'd have to keep our eye on.
I also want to share too that if we set these boxes on your property and then for whatever reason we run into an issue with it, the boxes can be moved. It's not set in stone forever. It's more like an agreement. We don't know how we're going to fare through the first winter. They haven't been there before. And if we ran into an issue, say with the one at number 1 in that parking lot and it just became a hazard or it was a concern, then as soon as that was brought to our attention, then we could get that box relocated to somewhere that wasn't so much of a concern.
Have you had to do that in East Tawas?
No.
No changes? Okay. Now, maybe you already said this and I missed it, maybe. If you have a cluster of boxes in a commercial business area rather than residential, let's say like the Tate's Hallmark area that we've referred to twice, and you have some kind of a package that just doesn't fit, you're not going to hang it on the basket in any way. You're going to bring it to the business with all their mail? Okay. I'm just thinking if you come in with a box, they might think that that's all the mail they have that
Well,
day.
No,
But
the
there's-
carriers know.
Oh,
The carriers
they will
know.
tell them, yeah.
And typically the businesses downtown that are receiving larger boxes are the continuous ones that normally receive larger boxes. So
Mhm.
they develop a rapport with the carrier and it's kind of almost like a friendship. They know and they kind of keep them informed. So if there is mail for that day, it does go in with the package.
Okay. Postal Service is doing a lot of national advertising about parcel delivery.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
because we've become very good at it.
Okay.
Do you plan on expanding this other than off US 23 corridor?
Not at this time, no. If there were a group of homes that wanted to, like a housing association group that wanted to expand, and they wanted us to expand to their area, we would look at it. We wouldn't guarantee that we would do it. But the housing group, like for example, on the air base here, has had some mixed reviews. Some folks in favor of, some not so in favor of. But centralized mailbox delivery is not for every area in America. It has to be a high dense area. It has to have a lot of deliveries. They're usually sensitive mail that are consumers that are businesses more or less. But we can apply it as needed and review anything that consumers want us to review.
Any other questions? I thank you for your presentation.
Thank
I
you
guess-
for having us.
Mhm. Who is going to determine in the back of the Township Hall whether you're going to put one by the tree or you're going to go across the parking lot? And who's going to be the tree hugger that's concerned about.
Well, if the township wanted the box there and they were willing to remove the tree or accept the responsibility for the damage to the tree, then our maintenance team is absolutely phenomenal and they have gone above and beyond to do whatever they can within reason. But if they start to dig down and it's gonna hurt the tree, something terrible, then we'd be calling Ann and saying, Ann, we have a big problem. And then
Yeah.
she would decide if we came back to present it to you again or how we would proceed, because we don't want to damage anyone's property. And one tree hugger could be the difference between one happy customer and one mad customer.
Okay. Where that tree is,
Uh-huh.
it is on our property, township property.
Mhm.
But the Methodist Church, that is right there, I think if I read that right, they like that tree. At their own expense, they put in 3 more trees as you go toward River Road. Taking that tree out would irritate a lot of people.
I don't want to take the tree out.
We would prefer to have it in the other spot.
Yeah, okay.
And one thing we could do too is you currently have a box that's already there in front of the building, and it's kind of on a little bit of a cookie of concrete. It's not. It's if you know what I'm familiar with. It's either heaved under the ground or it's not completely level, or maybe somebody hit it with a plow. What we could do too is make our pad a little bit bigger to accommodate, so that both boxes could be moved together. If that's what you'd want, or maybe you want to leave that one there. That's fine too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just want to know, there is an agreement that would need to be signed, and I will get that, a copy of that to the board
Tonight, tomorrow, when?
when they send it to me. I
Oh,
will have it.
okay. Next on our agenda is the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting, 26 September. Anybody have any corrections or questions about the minutes? Okay. Payment of bills to the tune of $176,383.59. Anybody have any item on here that they wish to pick out, analyze, question? Okay. Third part of the consent agenda is Mr. Stalker, the superintendent, has 3 items, and tonight the community development coordinator has 0 on as far as informational items. Any questions about the 3 from Bob's report? One dealing with the bicycle pathway, lift station number 25, and infiltration basin cleanings. So, okay.
I had a question on,
Sure.
number C, the filtration basin cleaning.
Yes, go ahead.
In the engineer's report, they're referring to basin 1 and 2 that needed cleaning, but the quote states basins 2 and 3.
I believe that's an error. I will confirm, but I am talking.
Both quotes, the original one, which was 22,000, was for 2 and 3, and the new one, which is far less, 2,000. That's what drew my attention to it, was such a drastic reduction in cost.
Right.
And if that's the case, I was wondering if it would be worthwhile to just include all of the basins for a total of 3,500 and have them all done.
Well, my understanding is there are 2 in particular that need attention now, the others could be deferred.
Right, and that was in change order number 8,
Yeah, right.
and that specified basins 1 and 2.
Well, I can certainly double check, but again.
I just want to make sure we're doing the right
Yeah.
ones if we're just doing one.
Yeah, they were all done, and apparently 2 of them have revegetated to the point where they've determined they need to be cleared and tilled
Right.
to be effective.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Anything else? I need a motion to accept the consent agenda. Okay.
Support.
All right, moved by Mr. Gieske, and the support came from Mr. Weed. Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Okay, next item is the superintendent report. And Bob has 8 items this evening. And the first one deals with revenue sharing, state revenue sharing.
Thank you. We have talked as recently as our work session about revenue sharing and the fact that the state has various components of the program. One is CVTRS, which stands for City Village Township Revenue Sharing. Look creative. But in our case, the economic impact on the community is about $17,629 based on the state's fiscal year, which is just getting underway. In order to get the full payment, we need to submit specified documents by December 1st. Board members might recall that we had purchased the subscription to the Munitrex financial management reporting software. And one of the benefits of that was a module that helped us put together this report. And we're frankly quite a ways ahead of schedule as compared to the last few years because of the efficiency that was available through the service. It was much less time consuming than extracting the data from budget documents and so forth. And a fair amount of the information is reported from the township to the state, and then Munitrex has direct access to it, and they can import it into their module for each community. So as a result of that recent effort, we've got an updated citizens guide, performance data dashboard, and debt service reports, along with a certification that I would be signing on behalf of the township, and I'm looking for approval to submit those materials in conformance with that submission deadline.
And have you talked to the Munitrex people about this? Will this be the first time we've used their module?
It will.
Yeah.
Yes.
So. I think you and I talked earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this figure that we stand to gain here, the revenue sharing, state aid, okay? It's state aid by a fancy name. $17,629 is about normal. It's not extra good or really bad. Do I have that right?
It's about the status quo for this component of the program, which is a very small part of the overall revenue sharing.
Okay.
payment.
Oh, it is not the complete picture.
No, this is just one element.
Yeah.
The total's over 500,000.
Okay. Once upon a time, we used to get a little over $1 million a year.
Correct. 1.1 something.
Yeah. That's why I'm asking the question. 17,629. Wow. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
I make a motion to execute the certification form and submit the required reports.
All right. Motion by Mr. Weed with support from Mr. Palmer that we do go ahead and execute the certification form. Submit it to the state. Anything else, folks, before we vote? Roll call, please.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Byer?
Yes. Okay, second item. Community Center work session dates.
Yes, at the last board meeting, A draft budget for the community center was submitted to the board by trustee Cummings, and there was a fair amount of discussion about that budget, and that led to apparent consensus that we should schedule a work session based upon the community center with the budget, as I understood it, being a focal point for that discussion. And that dialogue might include potential modification of the operating season for the community center. So based on that, I've identified some prospective work session dates, beginning with this Wednesday afternoon, the 12th. Thursday, the 13th would also have to be in the afternoon. We actually have a building infrastructure committee meeting in the morning. And then October 26th or 27th, moving forward, which would be a Wednesday or Thursday, appear to be good options as well. So I am hopeful that there is some consensus on appropriate date and time to schedule the work session, and if there was any desired specific input that the board had in constructing the agenda, we certainly can do that as well.
26th and 27th, what days of the week are those?
Wednesday and Thursday.
Wednesday and Thursdays, okay.
Those 2 days are good for me, the 12th and the 13th are not.
13th is no good for me.
26th, I will not be in town. I have a doctor's appointment in Saginaw.
I can do any day except the 12th.
Okay. Anybody have a problem with October 27th, Thursday? All right, let's, I make a motion that we go with the 27th.
Support.
Okay. What time is good for the board?
3 o'clock.
Okay,
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock it is. 27th, Thursday. Okay, did I get a support on that?
I'll support.
You
Mr.
gotta
Weed?
support, Mr. Weed supported you. I believe.
Okay, right. Roll call.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. All right,
Will
item,
the work session be here or in your office?
Here, I presume.
Here?
Mhm.
Okay, good, library.
Yes.
okay. Item 3, property and liability insurance renewal.
Yes, communication from Paul Olson, our insurance agent representing the Michigan Township Participating Plan. That is the program through which we've procured liability and property insurance for several years. Our normal practice is to get a renewal quotation for the upcoming coverage year, evaluate that, and determine whether moving forward and accepting it or soliciting competitive bids is appropriate. Last time we solicited bids was 2012 for the 13 coverage year. The renewal quotation represents a modest increase, and the amount is $71,176. It's approximately $1,000 more year to year. That is based upon 2 additional vehicles as compared to last year, and also an increased fee from the Catastrophic Claims Association operated by the state. I've also provided a summary of coverage that we received through the power plan for any board member that might be interested in that. My inclination is to suggest we renew coverage for 2017 and then discuss whether seeking competitive bids for 2018 would be appropriate. That would provide ample opportunity to do an RFP, particularly if we wanted to reach out to commercial carriers as well as the insurance pools. That might necessitate consideration of engaging the services of a risk management consultant. But key thing is, at this point, what direction do we want to give them for the upcoming coverage year?
I have 2 questions of you. Number 1 is it not true that in the last couple of years, it's been 3 years or so, but at 1 or 2 of those years, the yearly fee was actually reduced?
I believe that is true, at least one of those years.
Yes. And secondly, you're the guy that has to deal with the power plan representative. Are you happy with what you're getting? Is he easy to deal with?
I believe we've had good service from Mr.
Mhm.
Olson, yes.
Okay.
I've dealt with him on different things. He's super easy to deal with.
Yeah.
Super easy.
Seems like an amiable guy. He's been in Township Hall a few times.
I'll
Okay.
make a motion that we accept Par Plan's quotation.
Support.
Okay. Motion by Ms. McGuire with support from Mr. Weed. That we do go ahead with the power plan. Mr. Paul Olson,
We can go out for bid next year,
okay, or at least
2018.
talk about it if we
Yeah.
want to, or something
Mhm.
like that. So the amount is $71,176. Roll call, please.
Mr. Weed,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Gieske,
Yes.
Ms. Krasko, yes, Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes. Item 4, collective bargaining matters.
Yes, we have recently had discussions regarding both collective bargaining agreements and both groups represented. There are draft documents that are nearing hopefully the point where they can be finalized. There's one question that came up raised by one of the groups regarding the potential need to clarify language in that agreement regarding health care that's being provided. Even though it is the same plan, as those plans transition year to year, some elements change, and neither the bargaining units or the township are able to control that. So there may be some clarifying language that would affect both contracts. And the reason I point that out is it's taken a little bit longer for that process to come to closure than I had expected. At the same time, another topic's been raised in regard to collective bargaining that may require action at the board's discretion, and this involves the administrative secretary in the police department. She transitioned from part-time to full-time status in March of this year. At the time, my recollection in conjunction with the collective bargaining process was there was discussion about the personal leave and vacation schedule. Specifically, in her prior status, she was entitled to 9 personal leave days. In full-time status, that would become 5 vacation days and 3 personal leave days. And I think the intent, based on discussion, was that we would effectively hold her harmless and consider granting 1 additional personal leave day until the point at which she catches up, if you will, with the vacation accrual schedule, at which time, after 2 years, she would get 10 vacation days and then be beyond the 9 total. However, that's a situation that does not conform with the collective bargaining agreement. And what's happened is she's reached that point where she's exhausted leave, so the question has emerged. So my intent would be to do that, but I wanted to ensure that the board found it acceptable before we move forward and make that adjustment.
Bob, is that in conjunction with does that have something to do with the anniversary date thing that we had talked about adjusting with the collective bargaining, or this is something totally different?
This is different. That was wage establishment related. But there had been some discussion about the fact that we had situations where wages could be adjusted, and the intent that was expressed is that we should hold harmless in that instance as well, where people transition from one position to another.
So is that a policy we have now or something we were looking at in the future?
Well, it would be a new policy direction, frankly, but my understanding is that's the consensus is that we were going to essentially go in that direction, and in fact, the decisions that have been made in the last several months involving wages reflect that.
When would her change become to where she would be back on track?
Be at the end of 2 years' service as a full-time employee.
At the end of 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
So we would have to add that extra day this year and next year?
Yes.
Okay.
I guess maybe I missed that conversation, or if I could get some of the other thoughts of the board members, because I'm really not understanding it, or not sure why we're straying from our, how we have been handling it, I guess, in the past. I mean, I don't know if it's interpretation of how the handbook says it. Maybe some people viewed it differently all along, and then other people now are seeing, you know, maybe there's not quite so much clarity. But I guess I don't understand why we are changing it or talking about changing it. Are we gonna do this for everybody for this instance every time it happens?
Well, I think we're dealing with the bargaining unit. This question came up from the bargaining unit, and if we do that, yeah, it arguably becomes precedential.
And I guess I don't, your guys' thoughts? I guess I missed that.
My thought is that when you have somebody who transfers from one position to another, is that if they have to take a downgrade in something, if they're going from part-time to full-time, or switching departments, if they have to downgrade for something, then it's almost kind of a punishment towards them, which is kind of demoralizing. And I think that if you've got somebody who's had service with the township for a while, and they're actually progressing within the township, then they should actually maintain things or have things increased rather than taking a step backwards.
Well, I guess isn't that their choice to take that position or not take that position though too?
It is, but then again, I
Maybe
mean,
we should set policy before we start changing things.
and that was talked about during our work session, readjusting the policies to ensure clarity in these issues so that we don't have this continuous obscurity that happens, or something that could be perceived as a favoritism or whatever, even though that may not be happening. Want to eliminate any questions of that so the employees and the management know exactly how the process is supposed to proceed.
I'm pretty sure that's how it's been running, Aaron. And now we're changing it. No, go ahead.
I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, I said, I'm pretty sure that's what he's talking about doing, is how it's been handled until now. All of a sudden, we're like picking and choosing and doing things like that. I guess making a policy first to me would be a better decision, and then addressing it and moving forward. But
Okay.
that's just my thought, because I did miss that conversation.
Yeah,
But
my only thought on the point here that Aaron was making was that as a township or as an organization, we choose to take that person's request to want to hold that position. So we're probably evaluating them against other candidates. So it isn't the person's fault when you say that it's their choice. I mean, it is, I suppose. I mean, they've applied for it, but we've also decided that they're the best candidate for it too. That would be the reason we would hire them or transfer them.
So the
yeah.
board now, from now on, is gonna micromanage personnel issues?
Well, it seems to be happening that we have the issues coming up prior to actually defining a policy.
Right.
Of course, a policy should have been better defined years ago, but that's not what happened. So in order to deal with the situations we have with the last few transfers that have happened, we just need to remedy these situations and get the policies done all right about the same time. They're just kind of happening a little backwards of what they should because of the lack of a decent policy done a while back.
I would agree.
Yeah, and I've just recently gotten involved with some of the labor issues here, and it seems to me that our whole structure is way more complicated than it needs to be. But as Bob's pointed out, we're dealing with a union contract, so it's difficult to change our basic structure in midstream. My thought is at the end of this contract, we take a serious look at our overall structure of our pay plans and try and simplify that a little bit. We've got different steps and adjustments and all these kinds of things that I think could be worked out in a much easier fashion than what we're dealing. Now it's so complicated that I needed 3 lessons to even figure out what I was talking about for just a wage structure. So I think, but as Aaron said, I would hope as a township dealing with our employees that we would encourage our employees to stay with us and to move up within the ranks, so we don't have to go out and hire somebody new every time there's an opening. We would encourage, the employees that we have and have been with us for a while to move up. And while it's true that they make that choice and whatever the situation is, but it's just seems like a bad precedent to punish somebody for wanting to stay with the township and move up from a part-time to a full-time
Well,
position.
you know, and again.
And when you're only talking
well,
about one day,
Well, and you're also talking about they're going to full-time and they're getting full-time benefits, which equals quite a bit of money of a raise per hour also.
Right.
So, you know, I just guess we're like picking and choosing here little different things, and to me, you know, I think we're just getting too deep into, you know, somebody else's job that has been doing it, so it's kinda getting muddy waters. And I thought, since it is a labor contract, that it's pretty much, you know, legality-wise, we're not obligated to change that, if that's correct.
We are not. We certainly could address it in the labor contract specifically with some language, but that would have to be based on a fundamental policy
I'm all
decision.
for looking at it. I mean, I know what you're talking about, Bill, with the pay steps and the different levels. It can be very, very confusing for everybody that's administering it.
right?
So, you know, I'm all for that. I think we should just finish the contract out first and then address it moving forward. That's just my 2 cents.
Anyone else wish to weigh in on this?
I'm thinking you're opening a very large can of worms.
Well, you know, if we're in an era of fuzziness as far as people moving from one job to another, and if they do, they lose a day, a personal business day, or their wages drop back, go backwards. I kind of agree with what some of the gentlemen have said here, but I also agree that we ought to get rid of this fuzziness. But right now we're into it. It's like quicksand. We're into it, and I'm thinking that you know, if one of our employees is taking a new job and losing a personal business day, in a minute we have another item where somebody went backwards in wages and so forth. Let's take care of those and then clean up the mess. Drain the pool, get rid of the quicksand later.
I agree.
So, my thought. Anything else? Anybody else wish to? Well, it's a 2-year deal, right? It's going to, within 2 years, this particular one will be straightened out. So, I would make the motion that we provide one additional personal business day to the Police Department Administrative Secretary, which bumps her up to 4 days instead of just 3, until she qualifies for additional vacation time under the normal accrual schedule. And, okay. Motion by Byers, support by Palmer. Anything else? Okay, roll call.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
No?
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Okay, we move on to our TV coverage people, item 5.
Yes, this is a request on behalf of MIC TV. These are the folks that operate our dedicated education and government channels for us. Under an agreement, I provided a copy of that agreement for the board's information. Recently, during discussions with the principals, and that would be with an A, not an E, of the company, a request was made that the township consider providing additional compensation above the $100 a month we provide now, based upon the logistics and the time involved in operating from this particular location. And basically because we've moved out of a studio and a controlled environment where they can operate, there's a lot more effort required to set up and take down and so forth. So question was posed, would we consider compensating them for that to some extent? We had talked about potentially doubling the $100 payment. I note in my report that the township does pay for the cost of broadcast liability insurance, and that dates back, based on a little research today, to 2013. We've been doing that. The bill for this year was $2,590. That is above and beyond our obligation under the agreement. And I should also note that the idea of the $100 was for them to purchase additional programming. Don't say that to discourage us from compensating them, but that was the intent in the contract. So we may want to provide clarification there if the additional funding is for another purpose. And the idea would be that any compensation provided would be just for the period that they were involved in operating from a more challenging location. Hopefully we'll have a final home here in the not too distant future.
Okay, discussion?
Well, I'm certainly in favor of increasing the amount we pay them, because they're easily doing twice as much work.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem I have is I believe we need to amend the current agreement that we have with them, which was dated February of 2015, where it states that the township shall contribute funds for up to 50% of the cost of liability insurance in an amount not to exceed $500. So if the agreement actually is that we're paying the liability insurance, I think this clause in this agreement needs to be amended, which I'm fine with. I think we should, certainly pay the liability insurance, but I would like to see that reworded that the township shall contribute 100% of the liability insurance and at the discretion of the township.
Mm-hmm. So in other words, you're saying continue paying that amount,
right?
But make the wording right that
Well, so that since we have a written agreement that's been reduced to a written form, we should abide by what's in that agreement. And if that agreement needs to be amended, then that's what we should do to live up to what we're actually doing in reality.
Right. Care to make that a motion?
I will make that a motion.
Both things. Go to $200 and correct.
Motion that we raise on a temporary basis the fee that we pay to MIC TV from $100 to $200, and we amend the insurance stipulation in our agreement that the township will contribute 100% of the cost of liability insurance at the discretion of the township.
Support.
All right.
Hang on.
Mr. Palmer, supported by Mr. Weed. Any other viewpoints on this?
I think we're getting a great value for the relatively small amount of money we're paying. I mean, $100 to begin with, and doubling it to $200. I feel like it's exchange in abundance.
Well, the other option that I had considered mentioning was to increase the amount we pay them and then let them pay for their own insurance. But, I mean, it boils down to the same amount of money, so either way.
Mm-hmm. Wash. Approximately anyone here that can talk that's on the TV team, how long does it take you to set this up?
3 hours.
3 hours? Okay.
Did we get a support,
Pardon me?
Mr. Weed? Thank
Yes.
you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else on this? Okay, roll call, please.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. All right. Item 6 of 8, deputy clerk wage consideration.
This would be the other personnel matter that the supervisor made reference to. At a recent budget work session, the subject of wages and salaries was raised in reference to 2 specific topics. One of those was a request from the deputy clerk that a wage adjustment be considered potentially back to her date of hire in August of 2014. The underlying premise was that the wage established when she transitioned from the utility billing clerk position, which was part-time, to a full-time deputy clerk position, was not appropriate or equitable. The discussion at the work session appeared to indicate that the board was willing to entertain a wage adjustment request in retroactive form. Trustee Palmer volunteered to work with myself in developing a proposal, and I thank him for his time and efforts in that regard. There was some head scratching involved.
Mostly by me.
The proposal is attached to my report that resulted from our discussions, and the concept would be to adjust the starting pay going back to 2014 from what was then the year one rate, where it was originally established at $13.12, to year two, which would be $13.50 per hour, and then treat subsequent adjustments similar to all other employees. And that would mean COLA and steps beyond that point that would have occurred in the interim. And if you look on the schedule, the basis of each change in rate is identified. So the net effect then would be, in terms of an adjustment on a preliminary basis, $1,656.08. Right at the time I put my report together, that did not include overtime. The overtime amount is an additional $71.34 based on information provided by the clerk's office, so that the total amount, if the board were to opt for retroactive adjustment, would be $1,727.42. The primary rationale for the approach taken is it would place the deputy clerk on the same track as her counterpart in the treasurer's office from a starting standpoint. The deputy treasurer started at year two when he was employed the previous year. If the board were to consider authorizing an adjustment, I would suggest it might be advisable to consider conditioned approval upon execution of agreement that would acknowledge the adjustment addresses all outstanding issues on a retroactive basis. So essentially, do we want to make an adjustment, and if so, would it be retroactive?
Well, I missed that conversation because I was washing the skunk smell off of two dogs, but my question is, are we trying to create parity between the deputies? Number one, I read Jessica's letter and I appreciate all the effort that she took into it. However, all the examples that she had on there are irrelevant because the deputy's position is different than an employee's. They are appointed. They can't be fired unless Chris or I decide to get rid of them. Yes, the board does establish their salaries. So I guess my question to the board, because I missed the conversation, is are you trying to create parity for the deputies?
Yes.
Okay, then I would like that, because nobody came and talked to me about it, since I have a deputy also, to step back and take a look. If we're trying to create parity, then you need to look at, John has a degree in accounting for what he was hired to do. John also takes care of the general ledger, which is a statutorily duty of the clerk's office. So that's never been balanced, so I think that needs to be taken into consideration also.
Well, what we discussed in terms of education is that those qualities are things that are assessed at the time of hiring. Once you can and there should be some latitude in our wage scale when we hire somebody. That's a percentage that we could increase the base wage depending on certain qualifications a candidate might have. Once that employee is hired, then future education doesn't really play into their.
It's not future education. He had it when he was hired.
Right, that's what I mean.
So that should have been taken into consideration too.
And I'm assuming that it was when he was hired.
Well, then if Jessica's gonna get moved to level 2.
If you had two employees that one had a college degree and one did not, and you were considering hiring those two employees, I would assume the person making the decision would go with the person with a degree. Now, not necessarily, the other person may have more experience in that particular job. So you can't make a sweeping statement of what you would do all the time, but the point being that educational level should generally would only be considered when you're hiring a person. That's where that would come into place. And certainly work experience, time with the township should have some play
And
in,
it was,
in
she
what we
started
do.
out a level 1 instead of a 0, so that
Right.
was good. That was step 1.
Mhm.
Yeah, she did have a lot of experience with some of the programs.
Right, and what we were attempting to do, and at the last board meeting, and maybe that's why you weren't, you weren't here, you had skunk problems, I understand. But it was mentioned by the board that we should do a retroactive all the way back to 2014 on the whole amount. Well, when we started looking at it, what we found was that because the bargaining unit delayed the contract until September from the first of the year, so 2016, even the bargaining unit that had made a settlement weren't getting their pay back to the first of the year. So we didn't include Jessica's retroactive pay for part of it until September. So we're not making her retroactive back to the first of the year because none of the other employees received that same retroactive pay. So
Well, technically, the deputies should get it, their step increase.
well, but what we considered was that since none of the other employees got that part of it, we wouldn't include that with her.
Well, is
We
that,
only did the which part was it?
Well, the COLA wouldn't have been applicable.
Right,
So-
right.
so when you are appointed and you accept the job, then that doesn't matter. You can, again, legally, we're not obligated to make any changes. That's correct?
No, we are not.
Okay.
For me,
And-
this was not about establishing parity. This was about when you have someone, again, moving from one position to another, if you bump them back, again, it's almost like a punishment rather than a progression. So the time in service with the township should also be considered with it. And like Mr. Palmer said, when it comes to the education level, again, that's something that, as he said before, that's what gets you in the door. But we don't have a written standard that says, because if you have this education level, you'll get paid here. If you have this education level, you're gonna get paid down here. And without having that standard, we just can't arbitrarily make these obscure decisions. It needs to be consistent across the board.
I agree, but then how can you do it for one person because of their experience and not for somebody that went to college? You're making two different distinctions.
No.
You are. You just said that.
The fact that you go to college is only taken into account when you're hired. After that, it doesn't
Right.
matter.
And
I mean,
we're
I'm all in
making-
favor of people increasing their education. Anybody that wants to take additional classes, but
And I
we
understand
can't
that.
be in the
And she-
business of
and
of
that
paying for
position, given her experience, was compensated for at year 1 and not at year 0. She didn't start out at the bottom. Plus, again, with the benefit package that you get when you go to full-time, that was an increase of hourly of over $10 an hour, if you break it down.
But John got that too, so you can't even include that.
And
because
John
then
did
you're
get that
talking.
too, but that's because he had specific experience designated to the job that he had. The other clerk did not, or the deputy clerk did not.
Well, she had 6 years' experience with the township, plus she was making more money than John was working in the same office with him. So why moving to another office would that designate her to make less money when she was
Because-
already making more money than him?
Because we set it up so that the part-time people got paid more money an hour so that we could retain them. Simple as that.
Hence why a better policy needs to be written to make sure it's clear across the board for employees and management. So, my thought on this is that we set these two situations straight to where they should have been, and then a policy is written to make sure everything's clear, that when an employee transfers from one duty to another, or from part-time to full-time, full-time back to part-time, whatever it is, it's very clear as to exactly what's going to happen, and it equates to something that's balanced and fair, rather than, again, this thing of
Okay.
Well,
That's fine, balanced and fair, we're doing the clerk's job, John should be compensated for that.
no,
That
that's
would be balanced
between,
and
that's
fair.
between the clerk and treasurer's offices as to who's doing what duties in there.
No, it's
Um,
actually a board decision.
The board chose that clerk, so how did that come about?
That was before my time. And it's been an ongoing thing since before me. So I figured as long as the door was open, I was gonna take advantage of that too. Because if John is doing the clerk's job, then we need to compensate him for that. That's fair and balanced. Why can't you take a look at that too while you're at it?
Well, if that's been going on for years and years,
I guess I
then we
don't
need to make a
underst-
policy to make it changed, if that's
I
what
guess
the
I-
board feels it needs to do, is to change everybody's job.
I guess I don't understand what that is that you're referring to.
The general ledger, keeping the general ledgers, bookkeeping, the bookkeeping for the general ledger is a statutory duty for the clerk's office,
For the clerk's
which is
office.
the biggest chunk of the business. Everything ends up.
Who does that?
John, my deputy does that.
The
and it's
deputy
actually a-
treasurer.
Yes, actually is a function of the clerk's office. And no deputy treasurer, I'm not saying John or Jessica, and no deputy in the treasurer's office has ever been compensated to do that job. So I figured since
Well, if that's a
this is coming to
statutory
light,
responsibility
then,
of the clerk, then that needs to be looked at being transferred back to the clerk's office.
but I think he should be retroactively paid to be compensated to have taken care of it. If we're gonna keep it fair and balanced.
How would you determine that?
Well, you would determine what portion, how much of a job it is and compensate them accordingly.
But it would just be additional time, but at the same rate of pay, there wouldn't be a difference in rate of pay.
Well, of course there'd be a different rate of pay because he's doing more than his job that he's responsible for.
Did he know
He's
that at
actually
the
doing a
time he
lower
was
rate of
hired?
pay job, because the deputy clerk's rate of pay is lower than his. It will always be lower than his because he started before she did.
Mhm.
We're trying to make it parallel, but
Only
his will
because he
always.
started 2 years before she did, that's the only reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
That's why
exactly.
we can't bring hers up to his exact level.
No, I don't have a
It'll
problem
always-
bringing Jessica's up, bring his up, but you need to look at John's position now and say, let's make this fair and balanced. Because of the job duties he has.
Well, then why didn't the other boards ever make it equitable that the jobs were put in their perspectives? I believe this goes back to.
Because it never got to the board level, Chris, because every treasurer, we've just done it. Because you know what, we did it for the best of the board and for the township to just try to get along.
Bob, do you have any background knowledge of this? Jamie says it's a state law that,
If it's the issue that I believe it to be, it was raised many, many years ago. The way we're functioning is acceptable, but not, I guess I would say, the preferred approach based on the state law. And if the board were interested in it, we probably could resurrect some of the research that was done back, I think this goes back to the early 2000s when it first came out.
is there some science to this if it is a state law that they want to take this financial obligation out of the clerk's office so it isn't so cozy, everything done in the clerk's office or everything's done in the treasurer's office? They want to split it up a little bit and they think it's safer financially, fiscally.
Well, I guess my reaction to that would be that the auditors are well aware of how we operate.
Mhm.
And they would be probably the folks to ask that question. And if it was a significant concern, I would think that would be reported. Not that it can't be improved, but I think, as Ms. McGuire indicated, everybody has made an effort based on the allocation of resources between the two offices to make things work.
Mhm. Well, this is not an easy one for me. Jamie has a good point here, I guess. On the other hand, great care is taken by someone from the state or wherever that the treasurer and the clerk make the exact same salary.
Not necessarily. necessarily, but,
What would be the difference? Some kind of overtime thing, or?
well, just not in every situation are they paid the same.
Oh, all right. They are here, though.
They are here.
Yeah.
They always have been.
Okay.
Well, they haven't always been. That was one of the issues that was brought up, that it was done the same way. Whenever the new person came in, they were starting like at step one. But then when state law was investigated, it was found that they are supposed to make the same wage. So I believe that started back in about the 2000s as well.
So are you saying that of the some over 2,000 townships in Michigan, they've now all adopted this new policy?
I don't know what they've done. I can only speak for our township.
Okay.
I don't know what they do. I don't know what their clerks do. I don't know what their treasurers do either, so.
Well, I don't know. My thoughts, I guess, are simply that, like I said, if the treasurer and the clerk of a township like this one, we've adopted this policy sometime back, make the exact same salary for whatever reason, by law or by custom or by choice. There seems to be some logic that the deputy clerks and deputy treasurers are also in line and equal.
I could see that if they were all doing their statutory duties.
And why
You know,
did you
you-
not make an issue of this 2 years ago?
Because I've had many, many talks with Bob about it over the years, and so has previous treasurers. Because I just didn't think it needed to get to the board level because of the discussion and how it would go. But Jessica opened the door, so I figured I might as well jump through it as well. If it was all gonna come up, then I'm gonna bring it all up. So, I just think it's fair.
So does that create more hours the deputy treasurer has to work, to do that work? Is that?
It definitely creates a different workload, yes, definitely. It's his main function of what he does.
So does that involve more overtime then for him?
He has
over the
some
course of the year?
overtime, but actually John's been very good about not doing his overtime, doing a lot of overtime, that type of thing.
Well, I think he's had about 70 hours of overtime this year.
So,
Because I just don't see where that would be a difference in rate of pay for similar jobs.
because it's not our duty to do.
Well, then maybe we need to take a look at having that put back where it's supposed to be.
I would be happy with that, and then they can get paid the same amount of money. I'd be completely all right with that.
But didn't you say it was a statutory obligation?
Of the clerk's job, of the clerk's office.
Yes.
Mhm.
So then what is the statutory duty of the treasurer's office?
The treasurer's office takes the money, does the taxes, and accounts payable.
But you're not saying, I'm sorry to be so dense about this.
No, that's
but
okay.
You're not saying that there is a state law that says that this function has to be performed by the deputy treasurer?
No, not specifically the deputy treasurer.
Okay.
No.
All right. Okay. Well, folks,
I make a motion that we adjust the wage rate for the deputy clerk with the retroactive pay, $1,727.42.
Support.
motion by Mr. Weed with support from Mr. Palmer that we do go ahead with the adjustments that have been outlined.
Clarification, is that subject to execution of an agreement?
Agreement.
With, I had suggested that if we were going to do it, it'd be contingent potentially upon an agreement with the employee that resolves all outstanding issues.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'd just like to note that there'll be a new clerk coming in soon, so that might be a good time to make the transitions from one office to the other.
Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting scenarios that the election might affect, so. Okay, anything further on this before we
Yes.
vote? Yes, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, if the board really is concerned about the parity between the deputies, that they take the time and look at the job duties and the responsibilities that they have and compensate them correctly.
That's fair.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. All right. Remind us to do that. Don't let that just slip away, because that is a good point.
Well, actually, you know, as you were pretty good at this, I'm sure you can handle that too. Lots of discussion, you know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. I don't know if I just got zinged or not, but anyway, roll call, please.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
No.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
No.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Motion has passed. All right. Old Orchard Park yurt furnishings.
Yes, I've attached communication from our Parks and Recreation Director regarding furnishing 2 yurts at Old Orchard Park with furniture. The yurts have been purchased. I got a question earlier today, and I need to clarify or correct my report to some extent. One of the yurts is totally completed. Both have been purchased. The deck for the second one will be completed this week, and it will be finished this fall. I thought they were both up, but actually one is up, and they expect the other to be up very soon.
Which one is complete? The one that's going to be in Civilization or the one that's going to be in the woods?
The one in Civilization,
Okay.
which is a relative thing.
True.
And the reason that our Parks and Rec Director is moving ahead with this is that it is in the furnishing and completing this as part of our capital improvement plan for the current year. So he undertook some comparative shopping, not necessarily looking for the lowest bid, but the lowest cost for rustic furniture that's in keeping with the setting there. And the net result of that is the attached communication with the detail of what he would like to purchase. The total for both yurts would be $4,135, which would come out of the Old Orchard Park Capital Improvement Fund.
Bob, not related, but are they putting that yurt somewhere else than out on the point where the other ones are?
Mm-hmm.
There's one that's going to be near the registration office,
Oh, okay.
and then one out on the point,
Oh.
yes.
And the one near the registration office is going to be able to avail itself of electricity and
Yes.
other amenities?
That is my understanding.
Okay.
What constitutes rustic appearance?
That is a value judgment. But looking at the materials, the log pine look and
Oh, I get
that
it,
kind
okay.
of thing, yes.
All right.
That'd be my definition.
No, I'm thinking
Yes.
stainless steel wouldn't get it too good instead.
I can just foresee, this is not a biggie, but I can foresee people, again, using my simplified, one in the civilized place, one in the woods. Somebody renting that and having friends come up, or neighbors that come in and say, these are cool. And hey, we've got 2 more of them out in the wilderness here, and then they rent those and no electricity. I mean, and they're all upset and they want their money back or something like that.
I think we make it pretty clear that they're.
Better, or you got a can of worms coming up
Yeah,
here.
right.
All right, do we have a motion on this furnishing purchase for both new yurts?
So
Make-
moved.
Okay,
Support.
moved by Ms. McGuire with support from Mr. Palmer.
Yeah, I got a question for Bob. The deck, is that material being used that we bought for the Ratliff Park Pavilion?
They have used as much as possible. My
Much as
understanding
possible.
is, yeah,
Used
quite
it
a
up?
bit of it, yes.
Okay.
And there will be a railing around the decks for both of these?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Roll call, please.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Zoning map update.
Yes, in recent discussion with our zoning administrator, the prospect of updating the zoning map was raised in conjunction with the master plan update process. The map we have now has been updated manually, if you will, many times. It dates back to 2005, so there's been, as you might expect, quite a few rezonings that have taken place. The idea would be to develop a current and complete map that staff and the public could rely on in evaluating zoning boundaries. The proposed cost of the work through the Spicer Group is $1,800. It falls within administrative purchasing purview, but arguably it represents an expanded cost in relation to the master plan update, so I thought the board should be aware of it and comfortable with it. Spicer also indicated that for an additional $500, we could be provided with a GIS electronic file in the future once this is created. Based on the budget the board's approved, it looks like we're going to be heading down that path. So that $500 may be something we wish to consider in the future. But for the time being, the question is, do we want to accept the proposal from the Spicer Group in the amount of $1,800 to update that map?
Is satellite technology involved in this map? Is it accurate to that point? Or?
It would be with the GIS component,
Okay.
yes.
This is the thing Nancy's been trying to get, the GIS. Is this the same thing that she wants?
Well, the $500 would relate to what she's yes.
And she'd be able to use that as well?
She would, but the first step is just updating the paper version. And then we'll have a digital document creation capability from that we can move to in the future.
So we're not even looking at the $500
We're-
tonight?
No, not
Okay,
at this point.
that's for future.
How much zoning has changed since the last map?
Quite a few. I can't give you a number. Certainly we could do that, but there have been quite a few. I'm going to say, this would be a guess, frankly, but I'm going to say at least 25 rezonings in that amount of time.
I would like to point out one thing. If you look at the Spicer's scope of work here, number 3 item on here, it says after the township, I think that's supposed to be compiles the rezoning information. What that statement means is that our zoning administrator is going to have to take on 10 years worth of rezoning work. So I would like to have the board consider making our zoning administrator a full-time position, or if that were not available, that she would at least, we would look at a substantial amount of overtime for her to be able to accomplish this work. We're having our first planning commission meeting with Spicer for the master plan on Wednesday, and I'm anticipating that acquiring all this information for this zoning is going to take our zoning administrator on her current work schedule a very long time to put all this together. And I would like at this time to the board consider making that a full-time position.
Tonight?
At least consider it. We can bring it up for our next meeting, but I would like it because if you look at the amount of work just in what she's going to have to do for this master plan, this compiling, Spicer, you know, they're going to do a lot of the work, but number 3 in here is after we compile the information, that means our zoning administrator is compiling 10 years worth of zoning information.
Haven't we done this kind of thing before?
And
Like an overall compilation of things?
we have. It's been many years, but we have done it. We did it back in 2005 when,
Was our zoning administrator full-time then?
well, we actually had an assistant superintendent who did some of that at that point in time.
Wouldn't that be Ann's function now, kind of?
Well, certainly the existing staff, administrative staff could assist with the effort. I guess, frankly, I would caution the board. Certainly, we can use more help, but from a budgetary standpoint, we have not anticipated a full-time position in that office. And that is going to impact the negative outcome that we talked about in our budget work session. So I would just say proceed with caution. Not that we couldn't use more help, but in terms of the overall, the big picture, if you will, there would be some financial consequences of making that move.
Well, I think Bill just wants us to seriously consider it. So maybe we could add that to the next work session we have, where there's room for some items like this.
Seems to me we're missing some information here. I make a motion, we postpone this zoning map until the next meeting, until we get some more data regarding who's gonna take care of what and how much time it's gonna take.
I support that.
Is there any urgency on this map, Bob, that you know of?
I don't think a huge amount of urgency. We're getting into the slower season.
Okay.
And there's notes and stuff on the old one. I mean, it's not
Yeah.
like they don't have something to work with. Yes,
Yeah.
it would be nice if it was cleaned up.
Okay, the motion was made by Mr. Weed, support from Jamie. All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Motion carried. All right, next we go to the Community Development Coordinator.
Sorry about that. We were just discussing that we didn't have the ordinance identified underneath the resolutions and ordinances, but it is under an action item. So we should be able to address it this evening, if that's okay with you.
Okay, so the first item that Ann is going to talk about is a proposed ordinance about birds.
Great, thank you. Based on direction from the board at the August 22nd meeting, I requested that the township attorney draft the necessary ordinance to prohibit the feeding of specific birds on township-owned property. This would be a standalone ordinance that, if the board opts to approve this evening, would go into effect in 10 days. We also, that evening, discussed possible ideas for signage. So I did pull a few things off the internet as possible suggestions, and I thought it might be advisable to adjust those signs accordingly. For instance, Footsite Park is probably the only park that swans are at, so you would maybe have a picture of swans. So if the board is inclined to move forward with adoption of the ordinance, I would seek direction in regard to those sign options. There's just a couple pictures. I mean, obviously the really scary bird that's threatening you to
Pterodactyl?
trying to what's the word? Bully you into feeding them. Anyways, that wouldn't be part of the sign. It's more the shape, I guess. I mean, are we thinking, I don't know, when I kind of looked at this one bird head, it doesn't really necessarily look like a duck or anything like that. So just what your thoughts were in regard to the signs, and then my thought would be that we'd reference the ordinance at the bottom as well.
I like the scary bird. I like the scary bird.
Yeah. And just for clarification, I
Alfred Hitchcock of you.
Peggy Ridgway, which is a big, she's very involved in the Audubon, had called me to see how this ordinance would affect if the birding group wanted to have bird feeders eventually. Let's say once the township gets our property to the north of the beach park or anything like that, would that affect them feeding? And no, it wouldn't, because that's a different, those are like for finches or, small birds. So this is totally for the feeding of, the seagulls and actually gulls. She corrected me, there is no real bird called a seagull. They're just all gulls, so.
So we'll have a sign that says don't feed the birds, but in the ordinance, we specify particular kinds of birds.
Right.
So if it's not one of those particular kinds, then we can feed them.
But what's to stop the other birds from coming and getting the food that you're feeding the other kind of birds with?
Well, I am not
gonna enforce
saying
that?
that, right now, we don't have those bird feeders, but for instance, Shoreline Park, in Oscoda Township, they actually have an area where they have, it's all done by the Audubon members. They go and they feed the birds, and I'm assuming some public probably do it too, but it's at a designated area away from, really the picnicking area. They're not just throwing it on the ground, it's the bird feeders. So I'm just saying that if down the road, Audubon wanted to put feeders up in a designated area, that could be still allowed within the ordinance.
Even if these birds came and picked up the leftover
Bully the
seeds.
regular good birds out of there, yes, in theory.
But I'm still wondering about here that we've specified particular birds. What about the other birds? Just the general public.
Right.
Who says, I was trying to feed this bird, but then this bird came in and bullied that bird.
Mhm.
I'm just concerned about the legal portion of the wording here. If, you know, somebody were to say that, I don't like this, I'm gonna sue you.
Sounds like our public use policy, Aaron.
Yep.
Well, we did have this discussion, I guess, with Mr. Epper in regard to the question of the Audubon feeding the birds, and, I mean, he wrote the ordinance, so I don't know.
Probably.
I'm sure Bob has a better answer to that than I just did.
Use it up.
Sure.
Good
Yeah,
job.
let's get
Probably the most cautious way to proceed would be just to prohibit it, period. Feeding of the birds without trying to describe certain types of birds and so forth, but that then infringes on the potential that Ann's making reference to.
Were you serious, Aaron, about legal problems?
Yes.
Could we say something like you can't feed the birds unless
They're hungry.
they're in a designated feeder? Instead of just throwing it on the ground, if we have feeders down there that the Audubon puts, and they're designated feeders and there's feed in it, then all the birds should be welcome there. So could you maybe say something like that?
Well, if the Audubon wants to put feeders down, let's say Oscoda Beach Park, they have to ask us first.
Right.
Right, but he was saying that.
And if
you
we
know,
don't
we're
want the
talking now,
situation
so-
to be complicated,
Why
we'd
not?
say
We have
no.
Nobody to enforce it, so what difference does it
A
make, really?
suggestion maybe about in this area, wherever the sign is, that area is what is prohibited.
If the birds decide to sue us, they could hire a legal eagle.
Oh, you didn't
Right,
just
it's on
go
all,
there.
it's on all township property, I guess.
I worked on that
It could
so
be
hard.
even at the township
for
hall,
you.
for that matter, anything, or Furtaw Field.
It's a
Somebody
separate
went down
career.
and started feeding the geese, which,
Sit down,
which
Tommy.
again, feeding
Don't
of
crow
that
about
type
my
of
job.
bird, as I believe you pointed out, Aaron, I mean, people are feeding them with the wrong kind of feed. They're giving them white bread and so on, which is actually detrimental to their health. So there are issues,
But-
and that's why the swans are an issue and so on.
When you say all township property, be township owned, of course. not
Township-owned property.
Residential or,
Yes.
but- okay, got it.
Yes, any township-owned property.
I see.
I thought you were gonna pose a fine on the chronic feeder.
The chronic feeder.
He gets caught 15 times feeding the birds.
Oh, you know,
I thought we talked about that.
no, I think we just said that there was a fine, just like but there actually isn't anything
Isn't
identified.
anything in there about a fine?
Well, it's, right, about a fine.
I just wanted to make sure that this was gonna pass the legal check, that if for some reason somebody was issued a ticket and this were to go in front of a judge, that this is gonna hold as intended. And if our attorneys advise us that it will, then so be it.
Right.
Well, we can double check, but at this point, we clearly gotten legal input on the document.
Want to table this? Want to table this until we get?
You said you already had the input, correct? Then, no, I'm not interested in
Okay,
postponing it.
okay. All right.
We could go back and say that a specific concern has been raised. Are
Mhm.
we confident, totally confident that it will sustain the job?
I'd like to know the
Given the time of year
answer.
we are, there's really no urgency here, frankly.
You said you'd like to know the answer?
Sure.
All right, then I make a motion, we postpone ordinance 2016-258 until the next meeting.
How come you postpone it? Because she suggested it, but not me.
Because it's looking like there's a few people who wanted it postponed.
All right.
We want to get our own legal involved in this.
She prettier than
He's
I am.
pigeonholing you.
Yes.
I do like your shirt
Okay.
tonight, though.
Oh, now she's smooching up to you.
I said, she's prettier than I am. She said, much.
Okay. Then we have a motion and a support for that motion. Is that correct?
Ms. McGuire supported or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, roll call.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Krasko, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes, everybody understands we're voting on a postponement.
That's right.
Okay, all right. Okay, next item is record of decision, or ROD, Air Force.
No,
No?
building 220.
Building 220.
AT&T.
Yes, okay. I'm so intent on corny jokes that I missed this. All right, building 220.
Okay.
Mhm.
And building 220 is next to the community center, just so everybody, kind of looks a lot like the community center, same brick, okay. So the township currently leases approximately 745 square feet of building 220, which is located on Arrow Drive, to AT&T for telecommunication purposes. After years of negotiations, the agreement to lease was executed in 2011 and set forth a 3-year term with 2 options to extend the term of lease for an additional 3 years with each extension. The beginning lease rate was $950 a month from 2011 to 2013 and included a one-time lump sum payment in the amount of $130,658.36. The lump sum payment was for back owed rent that went back to 1993. The lease rate increased to $1,000 a month for the first option extension, which was 2014 to 16, and will increase to $1,050 for the second option extension, which is 2017 to 19. I have received a request from AT&T to exercise the second extension as called for in the original lease. Since this is the final extension, I suggested that perhaps an amendment could be made to the existing lease to allow for further extensions without having to renegotiate the overall lease document. This amendment approach was deemed acceptable by AT&T, and the township has been asked to consider actually increasing the term from the existing 3 to 5 years with a possible 2 5-year lease extensions. They were also amenable to the $50 monthly lease increases with each lease extension as set forth in the original lease. So if approved, the amended lease could be broken down to a lease term of 2019 to 2024 would be $1,100 a month. 2024 to 2029 would be $1,150 a month, and 2029 to 2034, when you start talking years that far away, is $1,200 if all lease options were exercised. So if the board is amenable to these suggested terms, I'm requesting authorization for the township's attorney to draft the necessary documents and then the supervisor and clerk to execute same and complete.
I believe the years shouldn't overlap, should they? The ranges there are overlapping? Would you say 2019 to 2024, and then you have the 2024 to 2000?
Oh, so I'm sorry, that should be 25 to, right.
Okay, right.
My
And the same would be-
mathematical skills are,
No trouble. And then the next one would be true for the 34, okay, good.
Are these rental rates gonna cover our maintenance costs for the next 20 years?
they are, I would assume so, yes. They're actually only utilizing 740 square feet within the building. We did all the improvements to the building. It has a new roof on it, new exterior. I mean, we do mow around the building, so. I mean, we could ask for more.
I just wanna make sure that
I think the premise is that probably that they have been covering our costs to date and their cost of living adjustments, so if nothing changes dramatically, they would.
We could always revisit it, right, at each extension anyways.
Not if we put it in the
Not really if you
contract.
put it in the contract.
Yeah.
Mhm. So they would possibly go for more, just starting with that. I mean, if you wanted to ask for an increase greater than that.
I meant, after the 5 years, you could.
Hmm?
You could revisit it after the 5 years, correct?
No, because you're setting forth the terms
the
of each
whole-
renewal
okay.
already. Mhm. So in theory, it's three 5-year deals.
So if you've already factored in the next 20 years of costs for maintaining 700 square feet of that building, then I'm amenable to this.
Mhm.
All right, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Weed with support from Mr. Gieske. Roll call.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. Krasko, yes. Mr. Byer?
Yes. Motion carried. Next.
Now you can vote.
Yes, record of decision, Air Force.
Great, this one has a lot of little RODs, all kinds of different things, so bear with me. The United States Air Force has announced a public comment period for public review and comment of the final draft or record of decision, which from now on I'll just say ROD, for installation restoration programs or IRPs, site FTO2, which is the fire training site at the former Wordsmith Air Force Base. The dates for comment are Wednesday, September 21st, concluding on Friday, October 21st. Under the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, public review and comment of an ROD are required prior to issuance of a final ROD describing an engineered remedy that will protect human health and environment at the site. I would note that this ROD work involves the volatile organic compounds remedy of the site, which is fuel and solvents, and does not include the current PFC contamination. The subject of the ROD was raised at the last meeting, and documents have been provided this evening in the event that the board deemed advisable to comment. If commentary is deemed advisable, it is suggested, it's the suggestion of staff that general comments relative to the need to aggressively remediate the site based on subsequent PFC contaminations should be offered, as opposed to more specific and technical commentary. In the final analysis, it would appear that the primary concern at play here is the effective and expedient remediation of the site and others, which is an apparent key contributor to current groundwater contamination issues. So, this evening I'm seeking direction from the board in regard to making comment of the underlying intent of any message that I'm seeking direction from the board.
I would like to say that this and the next subject down, to me, are kind of a little bit together here. Meaning that after reading that full report from the Air Force, because we received a response from, it was the Air Force, right, that said that we didn't really need to respond, only dealt with the VOCs?
Well, they didn't say that we didn't need to respond. I think Mr. Rakowski wanted to make sure that we were aware that the PFCs were not being discussed at all in this. That this had been an ongoing cleanup for just the volatile.
What concerns me about this is that we have a patch of soil under this area that has a few different categories of contamination within it. VOCs, PFCs, whatever else they're going to define in the future. And while in this particular spot they actually have a process for treating PFCs, it's more of just a pump and treat process. Then they've got a report that only deals with the VOCs. And when you're dealing with a patch of soils that contains all these different chemicals in it, they really need to have something much more comprehensive than this, something that's going to treat everything. And tackling this just one part and then another part, to me, is kind of hodgepodging this. Because they could end up sinking a bunch of wells, taking the cheaper version of this, and then finding out, well, this PFC thing's a little different than we thought. Now we got to excavate all these soils, which means also excavating all these wells. So now it's just a bigger issue. To me, if they would just do option 3, just excavate everything, treat all the soil, be done with it, we'd be a lot farther along than we have been for the last 20 years. So I think that we do need to have a response. And the letter I provided at the beginning of the meeting already has some quick notes about regarding a response with that. So in conjunction with that, into the next subject of this, my recommendation is that we do provide a response, but that we also designate a board member to work with the Air Force regarding this VOC issue and the response for that, and also being a representative for us for the initialization process of the RAB board, and to also attend the BCT meetings to start getting a full perspective of everything that's going on with this.
Isn't that what Bob does? So would we just redesignate him?
We have not attended a single BCT meeting until the very last one they had.
So, but what you're saying is like we would then designate Bob to attend these meetings?
Actually, I prefer a board member.
Why would that be?
I mean, the others can attend also, but I think it'd be good to have the elected representation through this process with the Air Force. I think we've had a lot of things where the Air Force has said, okay, well, this is all good to go, you don't need to worry about it. Oh, this is just a minor problem, not a big deal. We've heard that a few times over the years, and then all of a sudden, hey, guess what? This is a whole lot bigger than we thought it was. And I think with having the elected representation there would put a little more oomph behind our stance on this, that they need to press forward a little harder than they have been.
Well, I disagree, only because Bob's been dealing with the Air Force since the base closure, and probably before that, and I'd be a little reticent to stick somebody in there that hasn't attended or dealt with those people, on a one-to-one basis with the difficulties that they've had over the years with legal matters and environmental issues. So that's just my 2 cents. I know I wouldn't want to be that person, so I'm for having Bob still do that. Just to have continuity and the experience that he's had.
Isn't what Aaron's suggesting, have Bob and a board member?
Well, I thought that he would just go whenever, but it would be the board member's person. You want 2 people there then? Is that what you're saying?
I just want to make sure we have a board member involved with this process. And if that means both the superintendent and a board member there, then I'm good with that too.
Well, this is a kind of a tricky time regarding elections and stuff. We don't know
It is.
who's going to be here.
But we still have a month to go.
I know.
In 4 weeks,
Yeah.
there's some time that we should not be stalling on.
Mhm.
I'll volunteer to be that person.
I thought you said you didn't want to be that person.
Maybe it's just time I did.
I have an interest in the position as well, not to make everybody want to raise hands, but primarily because I live at the base.
Mhm.
And there are a lot of people at the base who have been looking to me to provide information about where this is all going. So I have some interest in that as well.
Well, by all means.
Didn't mean to make you abdicate.
She just got back out.
Let's go with both of these volunteers, and maybe they can, if one can't make it, the other can, or I don't think the world will come to an end if you both attended some
Right,
meetings.
well, 'cause
And that
I
will
have
ensure
taxes and-
continuity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
All
right. We
right.
definitely know one will be here.
Right, exactly, 'cause she's running uncontested, that's right, exactly. Right.
I make a motion that Treasurer McGuire and Trustee Cummings be members of this body and attend these meetings.
Support.
Roll call, please.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. All right.
I would also like to make a motion that we do the response for this VOCs,
Mhm.
and that those two designated board members work up the appropriate response for that. The filing deadline, I believe, is the 20th or 21st?
21st.
21st.
Who's the response going to go to?
This would go to the Air Force.
Mhm.
So for clarification, the board members are gonna work up the response, or you want staff to assist with that? And are
I'm
we
thinking
using
Of
this
course,
as a
with staff
guideline, or?
assistance.
Yeah, because you'll be sorry if I did it.
I think we'll be the presenters. I've found several things in here that actually were either missing. There were some places where dates were supposed to be added and they're missing. It just says the word date. So I've already started logging some corrections to the document that was included in the pack.
So then we just have to provide the written response to Dave Strange by the date. Mhm.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. You want that as a separate motion?
Correct.
I'll support that.
You?
Yes.
I actually do have a question on this topic of the ROD before we move on.
Sure.
So looking to Ann and Bob here. So in reading this document, do you see anything about this document that concerns you given the history that you've had dealing with the wordsmith contamination problem?
Well, I guess my comment would go not more towards the document itself, but more the need to encourage the regulatory community to be much more aggressive in general, whether it's removing soils or taking steps to contain the contamination on the property, to essentially advocate for prioritizing it from an economic standpoint. We need, it boils down to money, I think, and
Right.
there's some science questions here, but in the end, it becomes an economic priority, or should become an economic priority. And that's sort of been the push-pull all along, is how much is enough without getting into the technical details and, how effective the well is at 25 feet versus 45 feet kind of thing.
Fair enough. At some point, do you see, maybe relative to other examples of other contaminated Air Force or other service facilities, when it might be advantageous to the township to bring in a consultant, or do we not think that's an option at this time?
Well, it is potentially an option. There are cost considerations, so we've actually had some preliminary discussions with a consulting firm. Supervisor participated in that discussion. I just spoke with them, and certainly they're not the only option, but there could be some benefit from the technical standpoint. I mean, one thing you notice in reviewing those documents is somebody who does this for a living probably has a different perspective than any of us, at least speaking for myself anyway.
Right.
But there are economic considerations, and things are evolving right now. The discussion is we should know more in the not too distant future about what the regulatory standards may evolve to, and the potential role a consultant could play and how effective they would be, and whether there might be grants to support their involvement and that kind of thing. So I guess that's a long answer to the question that yes, it could be beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you very much.
And just to my point about having a few more people back behind this to push this issue, is that since the meeting had started tonight, the Air Force has already pumped 60,000 gallons of PFC contaminated water directly into Van Etten Lake and Van Etten Creek. So that's why I think that 4 weeks can make a difference.
Yep, I agree. Well, I think we need a vote.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. Krasko? Yes. Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Okay, next item is the Restoration Advisory Board and Township involvement.
I thought we combined the
we
whole
already did that.
discussion.
We combined
Is that
them?
what-
Yes,
is that-
okay.
Is that
All
what
right.
your
Yes,
thought process
yes.
was?
All right. Bennett Lake herbicide application.
Oh, I forgot I had one more. Sorry. All right. So at the August 8th meeting, I provided information about the 2 herbicide applications that had been approved by the Bennett and Weed Committee and completed to date this summer. Following that update, there was an additional survey of the lake and a recommendation to treat the algae that was found. A copy of that report and approval was included in the board's packet this evening. The amount of the last treatment was $10,850. As the board might recall, this new SAD functions different than previous. The township's general fund upfronted all the cost and will be reimbursed back by way of special assessment on the winter tax bill for the full amount expended. According to the resolution, this amount may not exceed a cap of $70,000 annually. The total amount expended for the 2016 season was $39,510. $7,000 was for the lake manager and $32,510 for the herbicide control and permit fees. This information was provided to the township assessor and treasurer, and the benefit unit formula will be used to compute the amount per property owner that will be assessed to the winter tax bill.
Have you got those figures yet, Jamie?
Already done.
Did they seem to go up or down from what they normally were?
Actually, well, they're down because, they're a little bit down.
Okay,
Well,
good.
the normal amount was $50,000. So we're, instead of taking $50,000 and breaking it up, we're now taking $39,510 for this year.
So they're gonna be
Right.
happy.
So
Yep.
it'll be less.
Okay, good.
It might be a little higher next year, but you
Right,
never know.
right, it's gonna fluctuate, but it will never be more than $70,000 per, that's the most that can be spent. And just also to let the board know that we are gonna be going out, or the Vila Group is gonna be going out to bid, for a new lake manager this year. I mean, it could be the same one that's been there, but they are going to, we just extended their contract for this 1 year. So I'll be putting together the RFP, for that, so.
Is there satisfaction with the present person, or
There is,
they
it's
just want
it's our normal purchasing,
Yep.
according, they abide by the township's purchasing, and, normally we go out to bid for that, but there is a little bit of latitude with the contracted service. And based on this new, the way, we just went through that special assessment district, and the new, we thought, keeping continuity and keeping Lake Pro for that one year as we got this one up and going would be a good idea, so.
All right. Resolutions and ordinances. For the first time in a few weeks, we do have a resolution. And on the board table, you'll notice that there is a new version of the resolution. It includes 4 names instead of 5. That's basically the only difference.
Correct.
Okay.
So the township created the local development finance authority, and the 7-member body is appointed by the chief executive officer of the township, which would be our supervisor, with approval of the governing body. We have several folks for whom reconsideration of appointment is necessary. There are also 3 vacancies which efforts will be made to fill in the not too distant future. But the LDFA, as we talked about at our budget work session, is moving forward and potentially implementing a road improvement project, so they want to ensure that their board is constituted and functional.
Yes, they have generated some money, and as I indicated, I think it was during a work session, and Bob just mentioned, there is a kind of an important road that they move rehabbed engines across, and right now it's a pretty rough road, so they have to drive about 2 miles an hour or something. Like, it takes them forever to get where they want to go. So the money has to be spent on the base, the funds that are generated by the LDFA.
I believe it has to be spent within the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. And Jamie, I might note, has been a member of that since its inception, and thank you.
You're welcome. I'm the chairman.
Are you now?
Mhm.
Okay, great.
Are there other incumbents on this list, or are there new names?
Well, Mr. Scanlon, Don Nolan is
He's on there, yeah.
he is a constant, Tim. He's the Coletta man in Oscoda. John Scanlon is the owner of Phoenix Enterprises, and but he will be new on this. So, is Christine going to be new?
No, she's there.
She's a repeat.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
But we have 3 vacancies on it.
Yes.
What are the qualifications that you have to become one of the members of it?
You have a pulse.
Oh, okay.
Okay, actually,
Just
there are
thought
3
we'd make-
people at large, actually.
Yes. Yes.
You know, somebody out there might be interested in it, so if you've
No.
got a pulse, feel free to contact
Start,
Jim.
yeah.
It's not easy to get members, you know.
That's right, encourage them.
This one's an interesting one.
Well, that's kind of reverse encouragement, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have pity on me.
Oh, they already do, so.
No, I have a, so, anyway, let's deal with this resolution with, you know, reappointing the 4 that are listed here. Do we have a motion to accept resolution, what number would this be, Bob?
16.
16?
Yeah.
Okay.
I make a motion to adopt resolution 2016-16.
Support.
Okay. All right, motion by Mr. Weed with support by Mr. Gajewski. All right. Resolution 2016-16. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Byer.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, under other, library assistant resignation.
Yes, Rita Bennett, a longtime employee at the library, has given her notice of resignation effective October 28th. I think it's noteworthy that Rita has worked for the township since 1978. And accordingly, thank her for many, many years of dedicated service. At the library originally in the Township Hall, where the assessor and treasurer are located now, and then transitioning out to the Parks Library.
Bob and I were talking this afternoon, and it was my understanding she was the senior Oscoda Township employee, 38 years, but she may be the second, right? Mr. Hamlin may have her beat, I don't know.
I think it's close.
Yeah. So, anyway, that's a long time, 38 years. So.
I'll make a motion, we accept the resignation with regrets. And wish
Okay.
her good luck.
Yes. Motion by Ms. McGuire with support from Mr. Weed that we do accept this resignation with regrets and wish her good luck and enjoyment of her retirement years. Roll call, please.
Ms. McGuire.
Yes.
Mr. Palmer.
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes.
Ms. Carrasco, yes. Mr. Cummings.
Yes.
Mr. Gajewski.
Yes.
Mr. Byer.
Yes. Okay, next item, communication from the Road Millage Study Committee.
Yes, our committee met for the first time on September 30th to begin deliberations on the topic. Trustee Weed was volunteered as chairperson, and some preliminary direction was established, which I've outlined in the memo here, and I emphasize it's preliminary, but if any board member has input, I'm sure the committee would appreciate that as they move forward in shaping some kind of an approach to a road millage. The Road Commission has a system called PASER ratings where they evaluate roads, and the committee's going to use those in conjunction with site visits to prioritize road needs. We've got copies of the PASER ratings for all the roads in our community, and there will be some field work involved. There was discussion about a road policy amendment potentially being necessary depending on the final direction that the discussion goes relative to special assessments in particular and whether they're maintained as a funding mechanism. Sidewalks would be included in the scope of the millage proposal, and for the time being the committee's looking at a proposal both supplementing and replacing existing road funding. The item that came out of discussion, however, that really brings the committee's business to the board this evening is discussion about the potential expansion of the scope of authority for the committee. In other words, would the board feel it to be of benefit and appropriate that the committee look at any and all millage proposals that the township has under consideration now? And the ones that come to mind immediately would be the police, which we've talked about in conjunction with the study preliminarily. And then depending on where discussion goes with the community center, that would be another alternative. The thought is that even though the millages are not directly related, you can't really talk about one without considering the impact of another on the public financially and otherwise. So the question is, would it be acceptable from the board's perspective for this committee to look at those other millage proposals, or at least police for the time being, as they formulate some recommendations?
Have the 3 members of this committee agreed to do this?
That was my impression, yes.
Okay. So their responsibility is going to be all facets of this. Choosing how many different millage topics, how much to ask for. Should they all be blended into one super millage proposal, or am I right?
You are, with any input from the board, certainly
Okay.
if there were overriding issues or concerns from the board's perspective, then that would be baked into the cake also.
Okay.
I would think that the discussion about the OCC might, if a millage were to be proposed, we would provide that number to them in that case, though. I don't think that would be
Correct.
for them to conclude.
Correct. They would have to work with
other
committees and people to ensure that everything correlates.
Right, yeah, because of the work session coming up, we don't know where that's all going to be.
Do we need a motion to create this new super committee?
I would say to at least acknowledge the broadened authority to include other millage proposals.
Do we have anyone that make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Support.
Okay. Moved by Mr. Weed with support from Mr. Cummings.
And this is, so that I get this correct, it's to do what now?
To give the original road millage study committee added authority to look at other millage possibilities.
When they do that, then they would bring that back to the board?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Ms. Krasko, yes. Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. Okay, final item under other, zoning ordinance amendment recommendations.
Yes, we have some memos from our zoning administrator, basically explaining the rationale for some proposed amendments to section 7.04, 7.4.1, and 7.4.2, where there's been an effort made to clarify the language to make it read better, make it more easily understood, to more clearly distinguish between building permit and zoning permit, and then a second amendment to the forestry district in section 4.2, which is intended to clearly delineate how non-conforming properties would be regulated in the forestry district, and that would essentially be as R1 low-density residential districts. So the ordinance amendments are being introduced this evening and then would be brought back at the next meeting for potential consideration of adoption. If you look at the colored copies of the ordinances, the yellow reflects new language. The areas that have been struck within the yellow are deletions. So The amendments are rather limited, but again, intended to clarify the intent and also provide guidance in forestry as to nonconformity regulations.
So this is the traditional two-step.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, I need a motion to begin the process, the two-step process of adopting amendments. Okay.
Support.
Moved by Mr. Cummings, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call, please.
Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Ms. Krasko, yes. Mr. Gieske?
Yes.
Mr. Weed?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes. All right, we move on to public comment. No cards needed. Anyone? Yes.
You want me to go right here, or can I just stay right here?
Well, we don't have a podium tonight, so just, would you please identify yourself?
My name is Jessica Hansen, and I'm the deputy clerk.
Yes.
And I just wanted to say thank you tonight for taking the situation with me into consideration and all the time spent on it. It's been very frustrating for a long time, and I truly appreciate your consideration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jessica.
Hi there, Kathy Boosterbarth. I just wanted to actually clarify a couple of things that that y'all discussed tonight. One of them was the work session for the community center. The community that I've spoken with, they want to have some input on the work session. So would they go through you, Bob, for that in terms of getting things on the agenda? They wanted to do that.
Well, that ultimately is up to the board. Typically, the agenda is controlled by the board, but if they had ideas, then certainly I could talk to the supervisor about that.
Okay, maybe they could go through a board member, request it through a board member?
Well, they certainly can come through me, but ultimately it would be up to the board what's on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, and then the next thing in terms of the Michigan TV or the taping of the meetings, the community is asking when I'm speaking with them where they can access those. Do we have
YouTube.
information on that right
YouTube.
now?
They've been posted on YouTube. So
Is this something that we've told the public about in terms of where they can access these? Is it in the paper somewhere? Have we let them know this?
I don't believe, my understanding is that, and certainly correct me if I'm wrong here, Eric, they haven't been able to get them on the broadcast channels, but they're available on YouTube.
Yeah, that's correct. It's actually live. This is the first time we're going live
Okay.
on YouTube.
Oh, it's live on YouTube?
right now.
Okay. All right. Is that something that we
Nice
could
to know.
somehow educate the public about? You know, if they're not watching right now? I think they'd appreciate that because there are many people that actually watch this and get a lot of value out of it, so.
maybe we can ask the assistance of our Oscoda press representative.
Right.
See what I can do.
Oh, okay.
That's not up to me what goes in there, but.
Put it on the Township's Facebook page also.
Okay. And then lastly, in terms, actually it kind of goes along the same lines in terms of the meeting locations. Have we talked about that at all in terms of future plans for that?
No, we're just beginning to look at options, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Do the people that want to attend the community center meeting have something new that they want to propose that they haven't already said, or do they just want to observe what's going on?
Well, in terms of just making sure there are certain items on the agenda maybe that are addressed. So, again, I guess I will ask one of the board members before the meeting, and
I think it was directed to Mr. Stalker.
so we should direct them to you.
Yes, and then I will
Okay.
proceed from there.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Regarding and I appreciate the time that the board has spent on discussing the RAB meeting and also the ROD. Regarding the ROD, there were a couple of comments made about working with in the past, the Air Force and so forth, and I just want to clarify that when you're reviewing these RODs or any documents, that it's not just the Air Force that you can make comments to on this. They are the primary proponent to draft the ROD. It's gone through 2 years of review in different forums with the Department of Environmental Quality that have made comments back and forth. However, any comment that you want to make to the DEQ about the process, the controls, the schedule, this is the time to do it. It's in this document. This is a joint approved document between the Air Force and the DEQ. It says in the document on page 1 that fact, but it also says the US EPA will concur on it. I have not been able to find that concurrence. So, because 2 years ago they backed out from being an overview agency, is my understanding. So this is your time to look at the DEQ's performance and what they're requiring and the control and future use and contamination control of our community. It's not just the Air Force.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Board comment.
I have a question for Mr. Joseph there. If they're looking for this YouTube, what are they looking for? Do they put in Oscoda Township board meeting, or what exactly are we looking for to get that YouTube?
Well, I just had JD looking it up, and he said that the easiest way he can find it is by typing in MICTV space Oscoda into the search.
MIC
TV.
And then we'll say Oscoda Township board meeting with the date.
MIC TV.
MIC TV in the search bar, and it'll come up as a channel.
Okay. And I'd also just like to remind everybody, as usual, get your absentee ballots early. Don't wait till the last minute. We've already done about 600 of them just in the last 3 days here that we've got sent out, going out. So if you want one, call and get them early.
Me. Next.
Mm-hmm.
Just an update on the winter tax bills. A few people are going to be really happy. This year they are not collecting the Lakewood drain maintenance, which has been an ongoing maintenance special assessment for a long time, and since longer before I've been here. When I first started working at the township part-time, they've never not collected it. So this is the first year they're doing that. Also with the Vanette and Dam maintenance as well. They're not collecting that this year, so you're going to get a little break on your tax bill.
Okay, good news, thank you.
I'd like to throw one out there. I went to the haunted house last Saturday, and I just wanted to tell everybody it was a great event, and I think everyone should go check it out if you're interested. It's a lot of fun.
It's in part of the hospital, right?
It is. It's
Yeah.
at the Union Medical Center. They
Yeah.
have those little road signs as you're going down Skeel.
I saw that tonight.
Yeah.
I thought it was in the wrong place.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the access is from California Street, so it'd be the northwest corner of the building. So it's every Saturday night through the end of the month, and starts at 7 p.m., $5 a person.
Saturday night only, not Friday?
Saturday night only.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. You also attended, Bob?
I did.
Similar thoughts?
Yeah, I did one of the trial runs when they were setting it up and sort of testing things. And yeah, it's very elaborate and well done, I thought. A lot of work.
Okay. All right.
I would like to mention, just for clarity's sake, because there was confusion from the last newspaper article regarding millages. So just from my point on as being my individually elected position on this board, I just want to say that I am vehemently against any millages being consolidated with other categories of things. I believe millages should be completely separated. I just didn't want something to be published in the paper that would create further confusion, that is the outlook that this committee is going for, because there are differences of opinions on that.
Okay. That's useful clarification. Anything else? Anybody else? We do have a new police car that has arrived. It's yet to be painted properly. The Hull Island Street project is partially done. Would you say half, Martin?
Yeah, I would say half.
Yeah, so.
Do we christen the car like it's maiden voyage or anything?
One way or another.
Okay.
And Alexander Road is going to be turned to gravel soon, is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. And then next year paved, so. Okay, anything else? Then I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay. We are adjourned.